My daddy was an Air Force colonel. I know how to be in charge.
You know, can I talk about Air Force cars? This reminds me too much of my dog tags. Can I take this off?
Sure?
You know
Okay.
who I am now.
Okay. Welcome back to the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum. Again, League is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering voters and defending democracy. In our 100-year history, we have never endorsed a candidate or a political party. Additionally, we are a 100% volunteer organization. We'll now hear the candidates for the mayor of Prospect Heights. The candidates are Larry Rosenthal and Nick Helmer. Just as a reminder, the candidates have agreed to abide by the ground rules provided by the League of Women Voters, and they are as follows. Candidates have drawn numbers to determine speaking order. The moderator will rotate the order during the forum. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for introduction. Next, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the questions. Finally, each candidate will have up to 3 rebuttals of 30 seconds over the course of the forum, and at the end, each candidate will have a 1-minute closing statement. League members, our league volunteers, all dressed in white, are in the room, are in the front here. They will act as timers. Candidates will have a 30-second and a 15-second warning. We ask them to quickly please come to their thought to an end before they see the stop card. Time limits are enforced out of respect for all of the candidates, and questions will be provided by the audience. Each question will be answered by all candidates, so please, audience, ask questions that pertain to all. Again, we only ask questions in this forum that pertain to both candidates. So if you give us a question that pertains to only one candidate, we won't use it. They have to pertain to both candidates. League members, again, are volunteers dressed in white, have index cards and pens for you to write questions on which will be picked up by these same volunteers. These questions are reviewed by our volunteers for clarity, appropriateness, and to avoid duplication. Candidates have been asked not to interrupt one another. The moderator will repeat a question if asked. Audience, may I please ask you to turn off all electronic devices out of respect for each other and for the candidates. Please hold your applause until the end, and please do not demonstrate in any way support or non-support of a candidate. There is space in the lobby for candidates to speak to supporters after the forum, and campaign literature will be available on the tables in the lobby. No campaign signs may be posted. Please be respectful of all candidates and the attendees. And again, I am pleased to introduce our expert moderator, Ms. Ann Jameson, who is a volunteer all the way from the League of Women Voters of Chicago. Thank you so much.
This is my second. All right, thank you. Like Heidi said, welcome back. So we're going to start with your 2-minute introduction, and per our random selection, Mr. Helmer is first. So you may begin.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to the,
Sorry.
first,
Sit down. You can start this time. Is the microphone not working?
It's not on.
Oh, okay. It's not on. Now it's on. Sorry.
Amen. Thank you. First of all, I think we want to thank the League of Women Voters. We want to thank the City of Prospect Heights and their library facility, and pleased that we drew some people that actually look like they're interested in what we have to say. So thank you for coming. Quickly said, some 8 years ago, I started as mayor of the city. We were talking at the time of bankruptcy. City Hall, 4 days a week, was open, should have been 5. The police station was closed 24/7. No reserve funds were available. Travelers Insurance owed us well over $500,000 as a settlement for the fire that resulted in the demolition of the City Hall. We had no sense of identity. Potholes everywhere, and I do mean everywhere. 42% vacant at our nearest shopping center, which is now occupied 92%. So none of these things exist anymore. And I think it speaks well of not only myself as heading the team, but of the aldermen who made it happen, because as one of the aldermen always tells me, Mayor, you can't vote. You can only vote on ties. So obviously I needed the support of the 5 aldermen, and they gave it to me for all these issues. So I'm pleased to be here. I'm pleased to be ready to answer any questions you have, and we can proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenthal?
Thank you, and also thank you to the league and for your help in moderating. Your first session was great. My name is Larry Rosenthal. I've been in the business world as a successful CEO or COO for over 40 years. The last organization I worked for as an employee, as COO, was for 10 years. It had a annual budget of $35 million with retained assets of $54 million. And we had a staff of 235 people working. And these organizations that I worked for also, prior to that time, were either small or medium-sized businesses. While they were tax-exempt organizations, we still had to run them like a business. Revenues had to exceed expenses if we were to continue to survive. I became alderman 4 years ago in Ward 2. And one of the first things I did at one of the first council meetings I participated in was asking the question of what happened to the strategic plan that was done 2 years before that. Well, nothing really was done. I volunteered to take that on for implementation. Lots of times strategic plans are done, they're nice and easy to do, but the implementation becomes difficult. Along those lines, in order to make the implementation possible, I created and sent a proposal to the council to create what we call the Strategic Directions Committee. I chaired that committee, and we did a number of things at that time that made things much better for the city in terms of budgeting and managing the overall structure. As your mayor, I will take a strategic approach to moving from a reactive approach to issues to a more strategic and proactive approach to making things happen. I want to create, I'm told to stop.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to our questions. As a reminder, if you have a question as a member of the audience, there are volunteers with cards. They can come around, write it down. They will go and be vetted for clarity and then come right up to me. So our first question, we're going to start with Mr. Rosenthal, and we're going to start big. What is the most important issue facing the city?
There are really two that are intertwined with each other. We're going to need to have significantly more. Our operating budget from day to day, it works fine. We're in no real trouble there. But we've got some major capital improvements that are coming up in terms of our sewers, water, flooding, our streets, that we can't afford. We don't have the money for it. So we, one, have to be able to work with our community and our residents in achieving the necessary revenues to make it happen. And then to involve our residents in what we're doing as leaders of the city. We're there to serve the community, not to have our own agendas going forward. So the most important thing is to have the citizens involved, have them understand what we need to do, and help us to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Helmer?
Thank you. We were able to eliminate potholes because everybody saw the potholes. They were all over the place. We have flooding and we have lack of drainage. Those are the two most important things, and I would lump in there, not as a throw-in, but as a goal for sidewalks to schools. We've gotten a full start on that program. When I first came in, people said, you'll never have lighting in Prospect Heights. I think they're right. I found that out. But you won't have any sidewalks. Not true. We're well on the way to adding more sidewalks, and in particular, the ways to school. So those two are very important, and I think there are many other things that we should focus on, but having flooding is a very visible thing, We raised about $5 million for Arlington Countryside, and that'll be the first. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so our next question, we're gonna start with Mr. Helmer. What are your priorities if elected?
Well, the reason I'm running is simple. We're not done yet. There are still things to do, whether it's downtown area improvement. We're not developing downtown. We're improving the downtown area. There are things that are important to people all around our city, and they come and talk to us about it. The Slough and Willow Road project is certainly the next one that we're working on. And as you heard earlier, a committee was started with 2 aldermen and 2 of the residents in that area, and Joe Wade, our administrator. That's going to be a big one. We have funding from the MWRD, and we have to add money to that. So there's several big ones, and there's a lot of little ones that we have to get done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenthal?
Yeah, would you just repeat the question again?
What are your priorities if elected?
Number one, I want to create opportunities so that the voice of all of the residents of Prospect Heights are heard and listened to and respected. We have lots of diversity in our community, and there are different ways in which we want to do things. I want to address directly the infrastructure issues. To me, those are the most important things we have to do. Development or organizing for a town center is not a priority, and during the course of my conversations with the neighborhoods, that's the least thing that they're concerned about. So the priority for me is going to be dealing with the flooding, the streets, and the sewers, and everything related to the infrastructure, because that directly has an effect on every single one of our properties, if we're property owners here, and the value of those properties. So that's where my priorities will be.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start with Mr. Rosenthal. How would you make yourself available to your constituents?
I will continue the approach I took as alderman for Ward 2, and even then I expanded it to include the entire city. I made myself available through phone calls, through email, through phone calls not only to the city number that I have, that we're given, but to my home as well. I made it a promise when I became alderman that every call, email, letter, whatever kind of communication I got from any resident anywhere in the city would be answered, and I've done that. And I will continue to do that as we've done it, as I have done it up to this point.
Thank you. Mr. Helmer?
Making yourself available 24/7 has been my pledge. Every piece of paper, advertising, whatever, has my cell phone number on it. And my wife will tell you that I'm always late for dinner because I stop at people's homes that are working out in the garage or anywhere, and she calls it trolling. Have you been trolling again, Nick? Well, yes. I like meeting people, I like talking to people, and I'm all over the city. I do have a real job also, by the way. I work for a very large company, and I also am a director of 15 banks, the inland banks throughout the region. So make yourself available, be there when they want you, and be there when they need you, not when you're going to just be there. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with Mr. Helmer. How do you think the city can improve transparency and communication with residents?
Well, I always encourage people to listen first and talk second. And by that I mean, you've got to listen to people and you've got to let them know what they're interested in. The airport situation right now is one of those interesting points. The Slough improvement area, the lake and Slough improvement area with a new road on Willow, that's a situation that you have to listen to. There are people that have told me they don't care about flooding in their homes. They don't want the Willow Road improvement done. There are people that said don't talk about extension of runways. Well, as late as the other day, President Horcher and I gave the direction to the airport group, and we took that part of the master plan discussion out of the master plan. There will be no airport runway extension.
Great, thank you. All right, we're gonna, Mr. Rosenthal,
Again, please repeat the question.
how do you think the city can improve transparency and communication with residents?
Transparency starts with the mayor and with all of the leadership in being accessible and available to them and willing to talk. You can never do too much of it, because in the end, what we're there for is to serve all those people. So any way that we can improve transparency is a good way. I've talked about my availability through telecommunications or in person. I also have done visits with various different parts of Ward 2 during my term as alderman.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna start with Mr. Rosenthal. What are some personal skills and experiences that you would bring to the job, and how would you turn your ideas into action?
Well, the nature of the work I did professionally involved me with people. It was a people-oriented job. I had in the case of one organization, there was a membership of over 35,000 physicians and surgeons, and I had to deal with them on a regular basis and be able to have ways in which we would gain consensus. It's through discussion, and what I would like to see happen in the city, if I am mayor, is that for each one of the wards, there would be a special citizens advisory committee that would be formed with the alderman, where the issues can be discussed on a regular basis with the alderman, and that would be reported during the course of our council meetings when we get the opportunity as elected officials to report. And where things are needed that go beyond that, we basically will set up, as we did with the Willow Road project, a citizens and elected officials
Okay, that's your time.
organization.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Helmer?
Thank you. I'm reminded that I was in the United States Army as a linguist major. I served in France in particular, not in World War II, by the way. It was in the 60s. And I learned to communicate with people. And what I bring to the table from that experience is public relations work, meeting with people that didn't talk my language. I didn't talk theirs until I learned it. So it's a situation now that I'm with the same company 50 years, and what we do there is do exactly what I do at City Hall. And that's to generate business, which is my most important, thank you, my most important situation. And deal with the fact that we're not alone. We have to talk and we have to listen. And what I bring is 50 years of experience to get that done.
Thank you. All right, starting with Mr. Helmer, what are some examples of how, for the purpose of serving our community, you have been able to work productively with others who do not share your views?
Well, I served 14 years on the airport board, and talk about the development of Chicago Executive Airport was a constant reminder that you have to listen for people that have different ideas or want no runway extension as we have now, and you have to listen to people. They elected us. We in turn hired staff. That is what's most important, and that's how we got here. So it's really important to listen more than anything else. And once you listen, you take action. It's not just listening. You've got to go do something about it. And I think that's the issue that is missed by most people that don't get along. They talk and they talk and they talk, but nothing ever gets done. So I think that that's really what it's all about.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenthal?
When you deal with various different individuals, you're bound to have differences of opinion. But there's a commonality regardless of what the issue is. And one finds that commonality, and you begin to build consensus on that basis. When I started the Strategic Directions Committee with some of the elected officials, we did have lots of disagreements. But what we did do is we kept working on what do we agree upon, and we built from there and came to direction that we could supply to the council. As a committee, we couldn't really take any direct action that would affect the city. We were responsible for coming with recommendations to the council for them to approve or disapprove. In the case of all of our recommendations, they approved all of them.
Thank you. Right, starting with Mr. Rosenthal, when nominating citizens for citizen boards and committees, what qualities, expertise, interests, and experience do you think are the most important to consider?
Well, there's really two things. Number one, the experience and competency of the person, assuming that individual has not done any volunteer work in the past, so that you have some basis for judging whether or not he or she can do the particular job. The other important thing to me is, when I had to create volunteer committees during the course of my profession, is what you needed to do is be able to tell the individual what you want them to do and for how long you want them to do it. Then they will want to volunteer. My experience with the community of Prospect Heights is people want to volunteer, they just want to be told what you want them to do. And that's the reason why when we create these committees, we have to have specific directions and duties and responsibilities for the committee to achieve, not just have meetings. We have to give them direction to do specific things. And then, as mayor, I would get out of their way and let them do their thing.
Thank you. Mr. Helmer?
Repeat your question, please.
When nominating citizens for citizen boards and committees, what qualities, expertise, interests, and experience do you think are most important to consider?
You know, you try to tailor a position that's there, but you have to tailor the person that's going to fill it. You have to look for knowledge, you have to look for experience, you have to look for action that results in the goals you're trying to achieve. We have about 8 committees now. I always love the police volunteer group. They're working, they're helping our police department to be one of the best police departments in the northwest suburbs. And that's the key to getting knowledge, experience, and doing something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, starting with Mr. Helmer, what are your budgeting priorities?
Well, I'd like the city to become rich. That would be nice. That guy that won that $20 billion thing could have lived here, but he didn't. So the point is, the budget is a moving target. It's not going to be what you deem it to be or want it to be or will make it be today. It's constantly watched. We have a good auditing group. We have a good group that oversees our accountants, for example. But I do want to restart the finance committee. We had a finance committee when I came in. For whatever reason, it disappeared. I wouldn't call it a watchdog group, but I would call it knowledgeable people that keep their eye on the numbers. You can only make a budget better by eliminating expenses or adding income. And that's the kind of thing we have to focus on to take care of the fact that we are now in pretty good shape.
All right, thank you. Mr. Rosenthal?
A budget, to me, is a financial plan of what you want to do, and you go forward from there. In order to be able to budget here in the city, we basically have two components of the budget. What I would call the operating budget, which is the day-to-day, everyday kind of things of activities that we have. Then we're pretty good there. Our balance is pretty good. Going forward, the projections look good. The other part of the budget or segment is what we call the capital budget for the major kinds of things that we need, such as streets and sewers and so on. That's where we have the issues now. That's where the problems are, in the sense that we don't have the money for that. It doesn't exist. And so we now have to look at how we're going to best be able to acquire those revenues to make them happen. Reducing expense is one option, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands, in fact, millions of dollars that reducing expenses are not gonna help.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Rosenthal, how would you facilitate economic development?
Economic development is something that we, the one thing, let me put it this way, the one thing we don't want to do, I don't believe, we had a professional consultant at Strategic Directions to talk to us about it, is to go out and buy land and hopefully a developer will come along and build it. The consultant told us at the committee is what you want to do is create a general set of specifications as to what would be acceptable to you as the council, and then let the developers come in and develop it. So what we would do, since the Strategic Committee gave that recommendation already, would be somewhere to encourage developers to come in and spend their own money.
All right, thank you. Mr. Helmer?
You know, I spend 3 to 4 days, sometimes more, Saturdays at City Hall. And the biggest thing, the most important thing in my mind to focus on is economic development. I spent a lot of time on it. I've been very successful with the help of the council to bring in new merchants, people that shop in our area, know Tony's Foods, they know the Deli for You, they know the places that can be improved, like the deli, for example, is going to improve their entire strip shopping center. So economic development is not only bringing in new people, it's working with the people we have, because they are your lifeline, they're your soldier out there. Because you could ask and say, hey, do you know anybody in this business? We need desperately restaurants. We need a breakfast place type restaurant. We go to all the other cities to eat, and we don't eat in our own city. So economic development is a critical issue. I know how to do it well.
Thank you. Do you like to use your first rebuttal?
I could use my first rebuttal, yeah.
Just one thing about restaurants are important, but as a city where we don't have, or locations where we do not have Lake Michigan water, restaurants can't come in because a restaurant can't work off of well water. So one goes with the other. So a prerequisite to getting restaurants in would be something that we'd have to address the Lake Michigan water issue. And as I understand it from the one person on our council who knows more about Lake Michigan water than Lake Michigan, we have 60% already on Lake Michigan water.
Okay, that's your time. Thank you. All right, starting with, I got off. Thank you. So we're going to begin this question with Mr. Helmer. How would you encourage more Prospect Heights businesses to participate in the Chamber of Commerce? Did you want to use one of your rebuttals too?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. That's what's happening.
I would like to ask Mr. Rosenthal, are you ahead of a group called the Romeos in Rob Roy? Group that goes out to eat lunch and have camaraderie, is that correct?
That's correct.
Where do you eat?
We eat in a restaurant that is in Mount Prospect.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's got to start with the basics ourselves.
All right. So 2 rebuttals, fun time. So this question we are going to start with Mr. Helmer. How would you encourage more Prospect Heights businesses to participate in the Chamber of Commerce?
That has been an enigma. An enigma is something you can't figure out. And first of all, the chamber does not solicit very well. I've tried to help them get into different places, and it doesn't happen. So it's got to be a two-way street. They've got to want more business from Prospect Heights, and we want to provide more business from Prospect Heights. We don't have very many merchants that could fill the 30, 40 plus members they have from Wheeling, but we can do a lot more, and that's where I've encouraged the chamber. I said, come on out, I'll go out with you. They all know me. I've been to every storefront and shaken every hand, and I can get you around. They have to be more aggressive in their marketing.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rosenthal?
I think before we start to do aggressive marketing and sales approaches, we need to find out why the commercial entities within Prospect Heights don't want to join the Chamber of Commerce, or why they're not joining the Chamber of Commerce. And then, as a marketing approach and sales approach, we would develop strategies to address those particular issues. So I think learning why they're not joining is the first thing we need to do.
Thank you. All right, starting with Mr. Rosenthal, what are your views on airport expansion?
I have been open about that. I don't believe that airport expansion in terms of extending the runways into either Wheeling or Prospect Heights is something that we would want. And as long as I'm on the council, anything that comes up that would approach that would have my negative vote. We have a community here, the airport is there. Some airports just can grow to a certain amount and that's it, and you have to agree that that's it. Even changing, there's been some discussion of changing the direction of the runway to solve some of the noise problem, could be in a situation where we solve a problem for one end of the city and create one for another part of the city. So I am opposed to any kind of runway expansion for the airport.
Thank you. Mr. Helmer?
I'm a pilot. I've been a pilot for 35 years, and what I want each and every time is the longest runway I can find. But I'm not irrational. What we have here at the Chicago Executive Airport, we're in a box. And in order to expand and lengthen, if you will, the runways, we have to break out of that box. What will that do? Well, it will displace thousands of people because you've got housing on our side of the airport and there's housing on the north side of the airport. That means we have to provide housing for the people that are there and to go anywhere else, etc. I'm going to read just 2 sentences. President Horker and I met a few days ago and we instructed the airport to change their master plan and add the news release that we got. Chicago Executive Airport today announced the elimination of consideration of runway expansion beyond the current airport boundaries as part of the master planning process. While the master plan update,
That's your time.
all right, there's no runway extension.
Thank you. Great, starting with Mr. Helmer, what is your vision for the town center?
The town center has been so misrepresented by people that don't ask questions and don't pay any attention to what is said after they get an answer. The town center was really, we don't have much of a town center. We've got maybe 3 buildings in town, and what I'd like to see, and Mr. Rosenthal was in favor of when we first started, is to change the facades of existing, knock down an older, much older building, built in the 30s as a matter of fact. And I was admonished by the council, they're not going to have Prospect Heights spend any money. Well, guess what? I agree with that. So right now, I've got the merchant that wants to improve their property, and I've got 15 seconds to tell you that there are only 2 other buildings that we can do anything about, and they are under contract. So once that gets done, facades will be done, and we will have new looking center of the city area.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rosenthal?
Here's an example of one who can learn. And Mr. Helmer is correct. At the time, he asked the Strategic Directions Committee to take a look at what needs to be done to develop a town center. I was in favor of it because I really didn't know what the extension was. The gut feel was it could bring more business, in my case, business to the community, therefore we could get more sales tax revenue, so on and so forth. As I began to learn what the implications were and how it has to be done and what professionals told us had to be done, my opinion and thoughts about it changed. I learned what the impact is and what we need to do. And this was something that we as the city could only undertake by saying, if you want to come in and develop something, here's the specifications you as a developer have to look at.
Okay.
Beyond that was nothing.
That's your time, thank you. Starting with Mr. Rosenthal, do you think that a city center could be financially beneficial with so many shopping centers around?
My opinion of that is that we are surrounded by shopping centers with facilities that are attractive, whether it be a restaurant or a supermarket or whatever. I am concerned also that any kind of development of a city center, in terms of the way they were envisioned, would be creating a swimming into what in management is referred to red water. That is, where competition is heavy and there's blood in the water. Would not be a blue water investment or venture where there is no competition. So I am concerned whether or not that would be a successful situation.
Thank you. Mr. Helmer?
Now, there's a great example of someone not listening to what I said. There are 3 buildings in the center of our city. Walgreens is all by itself, pretty nice building. City Hall is going to stay forever, in my opinion. We have the Deli for You, and they have now bought the entire center. They only had 1/3 of it. And also the, what I call affectionately a dump in our downtown area, and that's the Dr. Anna Center. And I told him that. He's a personal friend of mine. He has now got his under contract. And we will work within the confines of our development with Dan Peterson, and they will be like anyone else. They'll come in, they'll ask for permits, they will have requirements, and things will go on. That's it. That's our downtown center. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to use your second rebuttal?
Second one.
30-second rebuttal from Mr.
I'm glad
Rosenthal.
to hear that the mayor has changed the scope of what he envisioned a downtown or a town center to be. That originally is what we on the Strategic Directions Committee thought we were going to have and what we really wanted. There was not the scope of what the vision of a town center was going to be in the beginning.
Thank you. All right, starting with Mr. Helmer. What is your stance on city water for all homes?
City water for all homes. There's been a point made by the alderman that 60% of our city has water piped in from Lake Michigan. 40% do not. The 40% relates to single-family homes that are on half-acre lots or much larger, and that can't be serviced. That has to be serviced by a well at this point in time. We are not going to get piped water without $50 to $60 million of funds. Where do we get that? Someone give me a clue. I've talked to State Senator Durbin. I've talked to a lot of people on this issue. They laugh at me. The area 15 seconds next door to St. Alphonsus did it on their own. Special service area. I believe that's the way we'll get city water where we want it. A group has to get together, agree, and follow the situation that that place did.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Rosenthal?
We should only be considering city water where there is an area in the city that wants city water. I know from my discussions with the neighborhoods, there are some who want to stay on their wells and are happy with it, and that's fine. But there are others who are equally disturbed by having the wells and want to change to city water. What we as a city need to do is figure out a way how we can satisfy both components.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Rosenthal, what is your stance? Oh, you can use your rebuttal. Okay. Thank you.
The issue at St. Al's, up to St. Al's getting water for the students, the housing in Lake Claire. They got together, they had consensus over 51%, and they did it themselves. There's no reason that there are probably other areas If we cut it down to maybe 100 homes or less, it will do the same thing. They will determine, I don't know if someone's got a magic wand or something, but that's about the only way I see that happening.
Okay, thank you. All right, starting with Mr. Rosenthal, what is your stance on the flood project?
The flood project,
Yes,
and what are you deferring to as the flood project?
good question. All it says is, what is your stance on the flood project?
Well, if we take if I could assume that the definition for the flood project may be the Willow Road project, if that's what is being thought of, I'll respond in that context. If not, then we can talk about it another way. As far as the Willow Road project is concerned, we do have a situation with Willow Road itself that it floods very frequently in one area. That has to be solved. And working with MWRD, the Midwest Reclamation, I never remember their entire acronym, whatever it is, we're going to work with that. However, there is a portion of the community that did not feel that they had the opportunity for input and discussion about how it would affect them and what they really wanted. That's the reason why we created it. It took me a while, but I did it. The Willow Road River project in terms of getting that in. And we're going to hear what they say and go from there.
All right, thank you. Mr. Helmer? Okay, you may begin.
Well, I was thinking about the flooding. I believe that's a reference to the question of what the whole flood program is. We asked the engineers to do a study. The study came back and said, there are 20 areas that need work regarding flooding. I said, holy cow, how about we take the top 5? So they gave us the top 5, and the top 1 was Arlington Countryside. Arlington Countryside probably will be towards 4 million or more, but we started that program, and that's gonna work. I'm sure it is. Where we get money for more, I'm not too sure about that. But, so there's many areas in the city. The ponding, I drove past 2 of the homes coming over here, you know, it's like you could go swimming in the ponding. So there's much more involved in the flood control situation, but we started. That's what's important. The alderman agreed, the engineers agreed, and Arlington Countryside will be first.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Helmer, what do you see as the role of mayor, considering we have a city administrator?
Well, the nice thing is the city administrator has a salary, and he has a car. So we don't have that as for the mayor. For the first 4 years, the mayors and aldermen were paid $100 a month. Right now, that's been elevated to, I believe, $300 and $500. So for $6,000 a year, I get to spend 4 days a week at City Hall. I get to try to help everybody that calls my house or my cell phone or my friends. And the role of the mayor is a leader. He can't be a pusher. You know, it's like taking a string, laying it across the table. And if you want that string to end up in a certain place, you can't push that string that way. You have to get over here, and you have to, pull the string across that way. So a mayor has to be visible. A mayor has to have background and good ideas that worked in any other job, and especially in the same job.
All right.
And now I'm done.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Rosenthal?
The role of the mayor is a type of leadership role where that individual has to be looking ahead toward the horizon as to what will be coming and what issues are evolving or emerging for the issue. And there was an old approach to this in management. I remember in management schools there was that, is that the leader, in this case the mayor, is the leader of the orchestra being the city council and staff. But he's not the soloist. He brings the organization along and does not get too far ahead of it in terms of how it should be done. And particularly in our situation, it has to be done by consensus because the nature of our government here in Prospect Heights is that the council is the deliberating body and is the approving body.
All right, thank you. Starting with Mr. Rosenthal, please explain why we would need home rule and why it continues to be defeated.
Let me answer the last part of the question first. I did an assessment, my own personal assessment of why we lost this last time around. And the reason why is we did it too quickly in terms of getting appropriate education and understanding out on the part of the community. I also had done on my own, at that time, a financial analysis of what home rule would mean to the community. And the numbers I came up with, just looking at things we could do and could not do as a non-home rule committee, was something in the neighborhood of over $800,000 in additional revenue every single year. Not a one-time shot. It would be $800,000 plus in revenue every single year, which, as I looked at it, then made it possible for us to finance the capital improvements that I mentioned earlier.
Thank you. Mr. Helmer?
The driving problem of this situation is simple. When people say, see home rule, they say the second word. The second word is taxes. And they're scared to death of taxes. I'll give you a quick example. I tried to raise the parking stickers by $4 or $5. I had placards out front. That's less than a drink of Starbucks for a year. So anyway, everybody, we have a large senior citizen, hello, me, population. We don't want taxes, higher taxes. Cook County gets enough. And the schools, nobody pickets the schools, nobody pickets the library when they go for an increase. So the position really relates to that. And I don't think that's ever gonna change. And we could have done a better, better approach to it. But for 4 times, how many times do we need to do this again? We've got to come up with a program that works better than what we've done up till now.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, third rebuttal,
Okay.
30 seconds.
And in a sense, I agree with Mr. Helmer. We definitely needed to do a better education program. We needed more time with the educational program to make it happen. But there's a fundamental problem. Even those of us sitting here in our local communities, we're politicians. And politicians are not trusted. For whatever reasons that is the case. And even though we tried to, I had introduced a resolution that said that if any property taxes were going to be needed, because with my financial analysis, I didn't see any need for property taxes. If they were ever going to be needed, we were going to do it as if we were non-home rule, which was approved by the council unanimously, but we never went anywhere
All right,
with it.
that's your time. Thank you.
I didn't finish, but I can, all right.
Yes. Okay, and the last rebuttal.
I think what's important to note is that $800,000 is not quite a windfall. When you think about Arlington countryside costing $4 to $5 million, how far are we going to get with $800,000? That just it isn't the right answer. Home rule may come someday, but probably not in my lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, moving on. Starting with Mr. Helmer. Sometimes a person runs and is not able to fulfill their term. How would you go about appointing a replacement?
I have not heard of anyone doing that other than for medical reasons until just last 8 months ago when Wheeling tried to take away the accoutrements of mayor, or in this case, president, Horcher. They didn't like him for a single issue and they were going to get rid of him. Didn't work. People deserve who they voted for. And I think that was a good idea. I don't know anyone that, other than got sick, that left office. There are people in office as mayor, Al Larson, 29 years as the mayor of Schaumburg. It's just, I can't imagine it. Why do it, especially when a guy like me has had 2 terms of it. I'd rather have term limits. I like that. And I said that during my first discussion. We don't have term limits.
All right, thank you. Mr. Rosenthal?
Well, I would agree with Mr. Helmer that term limits is a good thing. I've done a number of elective offices in the past, and I've always been a believer of term limits, and have done that going forward. You don't take a position like this unless you're willing to stay through it and do what has to be done. Resignation just for the sake of resignation is inappropriate and is not right. You shouldn't have taken the position to begin with. So it's only health or biological reasons that would have you leave the position. And as I understand our municipal code, that in the event that there's a vacancy created in the position of mayor, then the remaining term of that person is selected by the incumbent for that, to replace that vacancy is decided by the city council.
Okay, thank you. Time requires that we now move on to our closing statements. Candidates will have 1 minute each, and we will begin with Mr. Helmer.
Thank you. I can only say this in very short words. Been there, done that. If you don't think you're better off now than you were 5 and 10 years ago, then let's get some potholes back and let's do some things that you lived with before I came to office. And we can do that one way or another. That's it. I've been there, I've done it all. I want to continue it for 4 more years. And believe me, I won't run again. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'm ready to pass on the microphone.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenthal?
Some people have thought that maybe there's really no difference between Mr. Helmer and me, but there is differences in our approach to things. And there are real differences. For example, I want to do things that lead projects that will benefit the residents of all of Prospect Heights. For all of his years in office, my opponent has talked about his town center. Not particularly well defined, it seems, because it's changed. This has been his top priority. I'm orientated and I look to the community. That's one thing. I want to be mayor for all of Prospect Heights. My opponent does not believe, for example, that the East Side is worth the effort. I'm a person who wants to involve all people as a team for Prospect Heights. My opponent thinks in terms of real estate transactions. In short, I want to be mayor for all of Prospect Heights citizens, no matter their background, culture, or location in the city.
Thank you. I want to thank you both for participating today. If you have further questions or want campaign literature for either of the ward candidates or the mayoral candidates, that will be out in the lobby. I'm going to turn it back over to Heidi.
Thank you again, Anne, for coming all the way out this way and volunteering your time to moderate our forum so expertly. We very much appreciate it. I want to thank the many volunteers of the League of Women Voters of Arlington Heights, Mount Prospect, Buffalo Grove, Elk Grove Village, Prospect Heights, and Wheeling for volunteering their time as well. We estimate that in February alone, for the candidate forums that we put on for our community, we've logged about 300 volunteer hours. By the time this election comes around, I estimate that time will grow to about 1,000 hours doing candidate forums in those communities alone. We could not have put on this free program without the support of Prospect Heights, a library for the use of today's free space. And finally, thank you to you, the audience, for taking your time to come out and participate in today's forums. Please remember that early voting opens in select locations March 18th, and the last day to request a mail-in ballot is March the 28th. All polling places will be open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. on April 2nd for the election. So thank you for coming. To remember to vote on April the 2nd, get your neighbors to vote, and follow us on social media. Have a great day. Thank you.